Part 1. The hook and set up. The wind was soft that afternoon, carrying the scent of rain and lilacs through the open window. Inside a small sunlit home on Maple Street, Emily Harper sat at her kitchen table, tracing her fingers along the rim of her teacup. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that reminded her how long it had been since laughter filled the rooms. For years, Emily had grown used to that stillness. She told herself it was peaceful, even comforting at times. Yet, somewhere deep inside, she knew it wasn't peace she was feeling, it was absence. At 45, Emily's life looked steady from the outside. She worked part-time at the town library, tended to her garden on weekends, and painted in the afternoons. Her days followed the same rhythm, like a melody that never changed its tune. But behind her calm smile was a quiet ache, one that came from years of loving, losing, and learning to carry on. The walls around her held pieces of her story. A framed photograph of her late husband, Daniel, rested on the mantel. His kind eyes and easy smile stared back at her every morning. It had been 7 years since he passed away, and though time had softened the pain, it hadn't erased it. Love, she had learned, doesn't vanish with loss. It lingers, woven into every ordinary moment that follows. That afternoon, Emily sat by the window with her easel set up before her. A blank canvas waited. She had planned to paint the sky. It was the one subject she never grew tired of. Maybe because the sky always changed. Hey? And somehow that gave her comfort. She dipped her brush in pale blue paint, then stopped. Her hand trembled just slightly. The color reminded her of Daniel's eyes, and suddenly, a rush of memories came flooding back. Laughter on the porch during summer rain, long drives to nowhere, whispered plans that time never let them finish. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Not today, she whispered. Not today. But the truth was, every day felt like today. Every sunrise carried the weight of all the things she'd once dreamed but never reached. Outside, the sky dimmed slightly as clouds began to gather. A gentle rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. Emily stood and crossed the room to make herself another cup of tea. The kettle's whistle broke the silence, and for a fleeting second, it felt like the house was alive again. As she poured the water, she glanced at the small stack of mail on the counter. Mostly bills and advertisements, the usual. But tucked between them was a handwritten envelope. Her heart lifted a little at the sight. It was rare these days to receive anything personal. She wiped her hands and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter from her sister, Claire, who lived a few towns away. Claire's words were warm and familiar. Updates about her children, stories about the neighbors, and a quick note that Ryan, Claire's son, and Emily's nephew had recently moved back to town after finishing graduate school. Emily smiled faintly. Ryan had always been special to her. When he was a boy, he'd spend entire summers at her house, following her around the garden, asking endless questions, painting alongside her. She could still remember the way his laughter would echo through the rooms. It had been almost 5 years since she last saw him. Time had a way of slipping by quietly, unnoticed. Setting the letter aside, Emily returned to her window seat. The rain had started now, light and steady. She loved the sound of it, the rhythm against the glass, like nature's way of whispering that everything passes. Everything renews. She reached for her brush again, determined to finish the painting she'd been avoiding all morning. But this time, something was different. The soft hum of rain mixed with the gentle creak of the floorboards, and a strange calmness settled over her. Then a knock. It was quiet at first, almost hesitant. Emily froze, the brush still in her hand. No one ever visited unannounced. The mailman had already come, and her neighbors rarely stopped by without calling. The knock came again, firmer this time, but still polite. Setting down her brush, she walked slowly toward the door. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the hall, each one blending with the soft patter of rain outside. When she opened the door, she found herself looking into a familiar face, one she hadn't seen in years. "Ryan?" She breathed out, surprise breaking through her calm tone. He stood there with a faint smile, rain droplets clinging to his jacket. "Hey, Aunt Emily, I was in the neighborhood." Thought I'd stop by. For a moment, she couldn't speak. He was taller now, older, but his eyes were the same. Bright, kind, and curious, just as she remembered. The silence between them stretched. Not uncomfortable, but full of unspoken warmth. Then Emily stepped aside. Of course. Come in before you catch cold. Ryan smiled, grateful, and stepped inside as the door closed behind them. Emily felt something stir in her chest. Not romance, not nostalgia exactly, but something gentler. A quiet realization that sometimes life sends you reminders when you least expect them. Outside, the rain continued to fall, steady and calm. Inside the house, for the first time in a long while, didn't feel quite so empty. And though Emily didn't know it yet, that simple knock on the door would be the beginning of a day she would remember for the rest of her life. The rain continued to fall softly outside, painting faint trails down the window panes. The house, once silent, now carried the gentle hum of conversation, the sound of two people rediscovering a bond they hadn't realized they missed so much. Emily placed a mug of tea in front of Ryan and smiled. Still, 2 sugars, no milk. She asked. He looked up with surprise. You remember that? Of course, she said with a quiet laugh. Some things don't fade. Ryan grinned, his expression warm but a little wistful. It's strange. I feel like I've been gone forever, and yet, this place hasn't changed at all. Emily followed his gaze around the room, the framed paintings, the wooden shelves lined with books, the soft blue curtains Daniel had chosen years ago. It hasn't, she admitted. Sometimes I think I keep it this way to remember the life I once had. He nodded thoughtfully. Uncle Daniel loved this house. I still remember him teaching me how to build that bird feeder out back. Emily's eyes softened. He did. He always said you had a natural gift for fixing things. Ryan chuckled. I think I just liked spending time with both of you. You two made everything feel like home. His words lingered in the air, gentle, sincere, and full of a warmth that stirred something deep inside her. She hadn't realized how much she missed being seen like that, not as a widow or an artist, but as someone who had once been part of something whole. For a few moments, neither spoke. They simply listened to the rain, the clinking of mugs, and the quiet comfort of being in the same room again. After a while, Ryan leaned back in his chair. I used to come here every summer, he said, his tone nostalgic. You'd make those lemon muffins, and Uncle Daniel would tell stories on the porch until sunset. I never told you this, but those were some of the happiest days of my childhood. Emily smiled, touched. He would have loved to hear that. I think he knew, Ryan said softly. You both gave me something I didn't even realize I needed back then. A sense of calm. You taught me how to slow down and notice small things. She tilted her head slightly. Small things. He nodded, smiling faintly, like the way you'd pause to watch the clouds change color, or how you'd paint the same view from the window every season. You taught me that moments don't have to be loud to matter. Emily's heart swelled at his words. So much time had passed, and yet he remembered the smallest details. It reminded her that kindness, once given, doesn't disappear. It becomes part of someone else's story. She took a sip of her tea, her voice quieter now. It's funny, she said. I used to think I was teaching you things. But maybe it was the other way around. Ryan looked at her curiously. What do you mean? You taught me that love doesn't just belong to romance or family, she explained, gazing out the rain-streaked window. It's in the way we care for people, even for a little while. It's in laughter, in shared stories, in how we remember each other. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's exactly how I see it too. Maybe that's why I came back. Emily turned toward him, surprised. You came back for that? He hesitated, then smiled gently. I think I came back because I missed how life felt simple here. Honest. Everything in the city moves too fast. People rush from one thing to another, but nothing feels real anymore. His words struck something inside her. She knew that feeling all too well, the emptiness that follows when the world keeps turning but your heart stays still. For a moment, she didn't speak. Instead, she looked at him not as the young boy who once painted beside her, but as a man trying to find his place in a world that sometimes forgets the value of stillness. "Do you still paint?" he asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. She smiled faintly. "Every day. It's the only way I know how to breathe." He nodded. "I remember your rule, paint what you feel, not what you see. I never understood it as a kid, but now I think I do." Emily's gaze softened. "That rule saved me after Daniel passed. Painting helped me turn grief into color. Every canvas became a place I could meet him again, in the light, the sky, the things we loved." Ryan leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle. "Do you ever paint people?" "Not often," she said. "Only when I feel a connection that deserves to be remembered." He smiled. "Then I hope someday you paint me." Emily laughed quietly, shaking her head. "We'll see." But inside something stirred, a feeling of warmth and gratitude. The rain had stopped by evening, leaving the air fresh and quiet. The clouds parted just enough for the setting sun to spill warm gold across the wet street. Emily stood by the window, still holding her mug, watching the world outside turn soft and glowing. Ryan was sitting on the couch behind her, flipping through one of her old sketchbooks. "You kept all of these?" he asked, his voice filled with quiet awe. "Every single one," Emily replied, smiling. "I can't seem to throw any of them away." He looked up from the page and chuckled softly. "Even the ones I ruined when I was a kid?" "You mean the ones you made better?" she said, laughing lightly. "You added stories to my colors." Ryan grinned, but there was something tender behind his expression. He turned a few more pages and stopped on a sketch of a lake surrounded by tall pine trees. "This was the place we went this summer. I turned 12, he said. "The one with the dock." Emily nodded slowly. "Lake Halton. Daniel loved that place. We used to sit for hours watching the light change on the water." Ryan's smile softened. "You painted that scene again and again. I remember thinking you were trying to capture something invisible." Emily sighed gently. "Maybe I was. Sometimes I think art is the only way I know how to keep moments alive." There was a pause, the kind that felt comfortable but heavy with meaning. The fading light cast long shadows across the room, and for a moment it felt as though time itself had slowed down. "Would you like to go there again?" Ryan asked suddenly. Emily blinked, surprised. "To the lake." He nodded. "Why not?" "It's only a short drive from here. Maybe it's time we both saw it again. Not as it was, but as it is." She hesitated. The idea felt fragile, almost too tender to touch. That lake carried pieces of her heart, memories of laughter, quiet love, and the ache of goodbye. Yet the thought of returning didn't feel painful anymore. It felt necessary. After a long moment, she smiled faintly. "Maybe I would like that." Ryan's face lit up. "Tomorrow, then?" Emily nodded. "Tomorrow." The decision hung between them like a spark, small but full of meaning. That night, after Ryan had left, Emily wandered through her quiet home. The sound of rain had faded completely, replaced by the soft hum of the evening wind. She paused in front of her latest painting, the one she'd started earlier that day. It was still unfinished. The sky, on it. The reflection on the lake only hinted at. She picked up her brush but didn't paint. Instead, she simply looked. For the first time in a long while, the emptiness she often felt didn't frighten her. It felt like space, space for something new to begin. Her eyes drifted toward the small letter from her sister still sitting on the counter. It was strange, she thought, how a single letter had led to all this, to Ryan's visit to Memories Reborn, to the quiet stirring of Hope. Life, she realized, had a way of surprising her even in the gentlest ways. The next morning came with soft sunlight and the distant chirping of sparrows. Emily dressed simply, a pale blue cardigan, a linen scarf, and a pair of old walking shoes. She hadn't been this nervous in years. When Ryan arrived, his easy smile calmed her. "You ready?" he asked, holding the car door open. "As I'll ever be," she replied. The drive was peaceful. The road curved through golden fields and quiet woods. Occasionally, they spoke small talk, stories from the past, but often they just let the silence fill the space between them. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be broken. As they neared the lake, Emily felt her heart tighten. The last time she had been there was with Daniel. She could almost hear his laughter carried in the wind. But when they arrived, something unexpected happened. The lake was different now, wider, deeper, framed by newer trees. The old dock was still there, weathered but standing. The air smelled of pine and memory. Ryan parked the car and stepped out first. "It's still beautiful," he said softly. Emily nodded, her eyes misty. "More than I remember." They walked slowly toward the dock, the boards creaking beneath their feet. The reflection of the clouds rippled across the water like a dream. Emily stood at the edge, her breath catching in her chest. "This place feels like time stopped here," Ryan said quietly. "No," Emily whispered. "Time didn't stop. It just learned how to breathe." He looked at her, uncertain at first, then understanding. There was something unspoken in her tone. Gratitude, closure, maybe even peace. They sat for a while without talking. The stillness wrapped around them, not heavy, but full of life. Emily watched the ripples spread across the lake and thought of how everything in life, even loss, moves outward, shaping what comes after. When she finally turned to Ryan, her voice was steady. "Thank you for bringing me here. I didn't realize how much I needed this." He smiled. "Maybe we both did." A soft breeze moved through the trees, and the sunlight shimmered across the water, turning everything gold. In that quiet moment, Emily felt something shift. A small but powerful realization. She wasn't trapped in her past anymore. She was part of the present again. Fate hadn't just brought Ryan to her door that afternoon. It had given her a second chance, not at romance, but at life connection. And meaning, the kind that doesn't fade when the day ends. As they headed back to the car, Emily turned one last time to look at the lake. The reflection of the sky danced across the surface, bright and alive, and deep down, she knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was the moment her heart began to open again. The drive back from the lake was quiet. The afternoon light filtered through the windshield, golden and calm. Yet neither Emily nor Ryan spoke much. Both seemed wrapped in thoughts they couldn't quite name. For Emily, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of meaning. Every passing tree, every glimmer of sunlight felt like a mirror of her heart. Peaceful on the surface, restless underneath. Ryan drove carefully, his eyes on the road but his mind far away. There was something about seeing Emily at the lake, her expression soft, her eyes distant yet alive, that had stirred emotions he didn't know how to process. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but it was deep, undeniable. And human. He respected her not just as his aunt by family ties, but as someone who had shaped the way he saw the world. She had given him warmth when he was young, and now, all these years later, he wanted to return that same light. But how could he say that without sounding like he was speaking of something more? He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and glanced at her. She was looking out the window, her reflection flickering against the fading light. "You okay?" he asked softly. She turned, startled by the question, then smiled faintly. "I think so. Just full of memories, good ones." Emily nodded slowly. "Mostly. But even the sad ones don't hurt as much now. It's strange how time softens everything, even heartbreak." Ryan didn't answer right away. Instead, he smiled in quiet agreement. He understood what she meant. Back at the house, the air carried that familiar scent of rain again, as though the sky was holding its breath, waiting. Emily set her bag down and turned to Ryan. "Would you like some dinner?" "It's not much, but I could make pasta." He smiled. "Only if you let me help this time." She laughed lightly. "Deal?" In the kitchen, the mood lightened. They moved easily together, chopping vegetables, boiling water, sharing small jokes that made the space feel alive again. It was a kind of togetherness that neither of them had felt in a long time. As the pot simmered, Ryan leaned against the counter, watching her stir the sauce. The steam rose around her, catching the light in a way that made the moment feel suspended, like a memory being written in real time. You know, he said quietly, you haven't changed much. Emily smiled without looking up. Oh, I've changed plenty. Time does that to everyone. Maybe on the outside, he said, but the way you see things, the calmness, the kindness, that's still there. You still find beauty where most people wouldn't even look. His words lingered in the air, soft but weighted. Emily paused for a moment before answering. Maybe that's all I know how to do. Look for light, even when it's fading. Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's exactly why people remember you. And Emily, you notice what others forget. For a long moment, they stood there, the kitchen filled with the quiet hum of boiling water and the low rhythm of their breathing. There was something unspoken between them, something that wasn't love in the usual sense, but connection, pure, deep, and fragile. When dinner was ready, they sat by the window, plates in hand, watching the first drops of rain return. The storm outside seemed softer this time, almost musical. This reminds me of when I was a kid, Ryan said with a half smile. You'd make hot cocoa whenever it rained, and we'd sit right here. Emily chuckled. You always spilled it, he laughed. I was 10. You can't expect perfection from a 10-year-old. Their laughter faded gently, replaced by a silence that felt heavier than before. Emily's gaze dropped to her plate. Ryan, she began softly, thank you for today. I didn't realize how much I needed to face that place again. I'm glad you did, he said. You looked at peace out there. She admitted. But it's more than that. I think I was scared to move forward, afraid that if I stopped holding on to the past, I'd lose the love that shaped me. Ryan set down his fork. You won't lose it, he said quietly. Love doesn't vanish just because life moves on. It just changes its form. Emily met his eyes. The truth in his words struck something inside her, something she'd felt but never dared to say aloud. You sound just... The next morning began quietly. The storm had passed, leaving behind a freshness that clung to the air and made every color outside look sharper, every sound softer. The world felt rinsed clean, and yet, inside Emily's heart, something remained unsettled. She stood by the kitchen window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Ryan was still asleep on the couch, a blanket draped over him, one arm resting across his chest. He looked peaceful, younger somehow. It was strange how quickly their rhythm had returned. Yesterday had felt like a bridge between two different times, a reminder that life could still surprise you. Even when you thought it had nothing left to offer, Emily made coffee quietly, letting the smell fill the kitchen. She didn't know what the day would bring, but something told her it wouldn't be ordinary. When Ryan woke up, sunlight was already stretching across the floor. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. Morning, he said with a sleepy smile. Good morning, she replied, setting a mug of coffee on the table for him. You sleep well? Too well, he chuckled. I haven't had a night that peaceful in months. Emily smiled but didn't respond. Her thoughts were elsewhere, replaying fragments of their conversations. The words left hanging between them, the looks that said more than either of them dared to voice. Ryan noticed her silence. You've been quiet, he said softly. Something on your mind? She hesitated, then met his eyes. A lot of things, actually. Yesterday brought up more than I expected. He nodded slowly, understanding. It did the same for me. There was no need to explain further. The pause between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't yet said. Later that afternoon, they decided to take a walk. The path behind Emily's house wound through the woods and opened to a small hill that overlooked the town. The grass was still damp from the rain, glistening in the sunlight. They walked side by side in comfortable silence for a while. The kind that felt more like company than absence. Then Ryan stopped. You ever wonder why life brings certain people back when we least expect it? Emily turned to him, curious. What do you mean? He took a deep breath. I think about it a lot. About timing. About how some people drift away and then years later, they reappear, not by accident, but because maybe we weren't finished learning from them. Emily smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's been doing a lot of thinking. He gave a small laugh. Maybe too much. The wind carried their laughter away, leaving a soft hush around them. Then, after a long pause, Ryan's tone changed. Gentler, steadier. You know, Aunt Emily? He hesitated. When I came here, I thought I was just visiting family. But being here again, it's made me realize how much you shaped who I became. Emily's expression softened, touched by his words. That's kind of you to say. Mean it, he continued. When I was younger, you were the one person who always made me feel understood. You didn't just listen, you saw me. Even when I was lost, you never judged me. You just believed in me. She blinked, moved by the sincerity in his voice. Ryan, she whispered, I didn't do anything extraordinary. You did, he said firmly. You reminded me that kindness can be enough. That love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. Emily looked down, her chest tightening. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she'd needed to hear those words. For years, she'd carried quiet doubts about the choices she'd made, but the love she lost and the person she became after. Tears glimmered at the edges of her eyes. You have no idea what that means to me, she said softly. Ryan took a small step closer, careful, respectful. You gave me something I couldn't repay, he said. And when I saw you again, I realized I never told you how much you mattered to me. They stood there for a moment, the breeze rustling through the trees. The sunlight spilling across the clearing. Emily swallowed hard. You don't owe me anything, Ryan, but I'm grateful, more than you know. Because after Daniel passed, I thought I'd never have that kind of connection again, that sense of being seen. He nodded, his expression full of empathy. Maybe that's what this is about. Not replacing anyone, not rewriting anything, just realizing that the heart doesn't close, even when we think it has. Her eyes met his, a quiet understanding passing between them. Free of confusion, full of truth. It wasn't romance in the way the world defined it. It was something older, deeper, a recognition of two souls who had helped each other find light again. Emily exhaled slowly. You know, she said, I think I was afraid of feeling again. Afraid that if I let myself care, I'd lose more. But you reminded me that caring isn't weakness. Ryan smiled gently. It's courage. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Yes, courage. They stayed there on the hilltop until the sun began to dip behind the trees. The light turned amber, the air cooling as evening crept in. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice quiet but steady. Ryan, thank you for saying what you did today. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it, or how much I needed to say this too. You've grown into someone I deeply respect. Not just for what you've done, but for the way you see the world. I'm proud of you. He looked down, his throat tight with emotion. That means more than you know. It should, she said with a soft smile. Because I mean every word. For the first time, neither of them felt the weight of the past. The truth had been spoken, not in grand declarations, but in the gentle acknowledgement of what they'd become to each other. Two people who had carried one another through quiet storms and unspoken loneliness. The moment was pure, tender and real, a turning point that didn't need drama to be powerful. As they walked back, side by side, the first stars began to appear. Emily looked up, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Some truths, she realized, didn't break you when spoken. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently across Emily's living room, warming the furniture, the shelves, and her easel by the window. The world outside was calm. Birds chirped softly, and the air carried the sweet scent of rain-soaked earth. Inside, the house felt lighter, as though the echoes of the past had finally found their place. Emily sat at her easel, brush in hand, and looked at the canvas she had started the day before. It was no longer just a painting of the lake or the sky. It was something more. It was a record of memory and feeling, of moments shared and emotions quietly understood. She began to paint again, this time with a gentler, freer touch, letting the colors flow without constraint. From the couch, Ryan watched quietly, sipping his coffee. He didn't need to speak. She didn't need to explain. Their hearts already understood what words could not capture. After a few minutes, Emily put down her brush and stepped back to look at the finished work. The lake glimmered with golden light, reflecting the clouds and the trees. The dock stood firm, weathered but strong, just as it had in reality. And on the shore, two small figures stood, one representing herself, the other representing Ryan, connected not by grand gestures, but by shared presence, understanding, and quiet care. She smiled softly. It wasn't a scene of perfection. It was a scene of truth. Later that day, they decided to take a walk through the small town. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional car or a passing neighbor. Emily pointed out shops she had always loved, trees that bloomed at just the right time each year, and the small park bench where she used to read every afternoon. Ryan listened, asking questions and sharing his own memories. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of companionship that wasn't rushed or forced. It was natural, comfortable, and full of meaning at the town square. They paused. The fountain sparkled in the late afternoon light, water cascading gently. Emily watched a few children tossing coins into the water, their laughter pure and free. She turned to Ryan, her expression soft. "You know," she said, I used to think happiness was something we chase and sometimes miss. But maybe it's more like a quiet moment, a place you can step into when the world is still." Ryan nodded, smiling. "I think you've just described what we've been doing together." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of relief, of recognition, of gratitude for the life she had lived, the losses she had endured, and the people who had returned to her world, reminding her of warmth and connection as the sun began to dip behind the hills. Casting golden shadows across the streets, they returned to Emily's house. The light from the setting sun fell across the easel, illuminating the painting in a glow that felt almost alive. Ryan leaned slightly against the doorframe. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. Emily smiled, her hands still on the brush. "So are moments like this. Simple, unspoken, but full of meaning." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. They didn't need to over-explain or make promises. The understanding between them was enough. "You know," Ryan said, "I'm glad I came back. I didn't realize how much I needed to reconnect. Not just with the past, but with someone who helped shape who I am." Emily looked at him, her eyes warm. "And I didn't realize how much I needed that too." Sometimes we carry silence for so long that we forget it can be broken with a single visit, a single conversation, or even just a shared moment. Evening settled into the house with a quiet hush. They shared a simple meal, laughing softly at small stories from their past. The conversation ebbed and flowed naturally. No pressure, no expectations. It's only genuine connection. After dinner, Emily stepped onto the porch, looking out of a healed view.